Hello, my CTO demon friends. Welcome back to the channel. Today, not a core curriculum talk. Instead, we're going to talk about something that's quite controversial. The question we want to address today is, should we do CTO PCI? Now, of course, I could go on to a very academic talk and talk about all the evidence, the registries, the trial, the randomized trials, and so on and so forth, and give you an answer from that. But today I don't want to do that. I mean, there are many people who've done great talks on this, but I want to instead think about things more historically and philosophically. Now, first, I'm going to start off with a story. That's a story between me and S.J. Park. Everybody knows S.J. Park, the famous left main guy, one of the leaders of coronary intervention in Korea. Now, he actually came to Hong Kong quite a few years ago. This is more than a decade ago. And I was still quite junior then. But the society that I founded, the Hong Kong Stent, which is a charitable organization to teach intervention, hosted S.J. Park's visit to Hong Kong. And we're having dinner in a very nice Chinese restaurant. And there was S.J. sat in the middle. And next to him was Michael Lee, the founding president of Hong Kong Stent, and Tam Li Wah, who's a very strong CTO interventionist, who's also been the president of Hong Kong Stent. And then myself, and then C.K. Chan, another very keen CTO guy in Hong Kong who does a lot of retrogrades and great CTO skills. And so we all sat there, and S.J. Park says he's concentrating on left main. And S.J. is very clever. He actually has very good ideas. His idea is that he does left main because left main saves lives. You do a left main, you save somebody's lives. And the CTO doesn't save lives. So he says, you shouldn't do CTO. And, he's quite a bit older than all of us. So CK, who's always very nice, sitting next to me, so shyly says, but Professor Park, I like to do CTO. It's a passion. He got a sort of tut-tut frown from SJ. Then I turned to Professor Park and I said, you know what? I have to disagree. I want to think about it in another way. I said, all diseases have a baseline risk. And you're almost always better off without that disease, or cured that disease, or open that vessel, or repair that valve. You're always better off than if you left it. It just depends on the risk of the procedure. And so I went back to a teaching that I had from my MD trainer back in London, Professor John Chambers. And John Chambers used to say this. Of course, I didn't tell S.J. Park that this is John Chambers' idea. I just stole his idea and played it off as my own. But I said, John Chambers said this. He said, when should you replace or repair a mitral valve? Now, this is back in the early 90s. So back in those days, really, we used to replace a mitral valve when there was class 4 heart failure and there was severe MR. That was the indication. So I said to SJ, I said, back in the 90s, when would you replace a mitral valve? When there was severe MR and there was class 4 heart failure. You wouldn't do it for any else. Why? Because mitral valve replacement was considerably high risk. And you have to have the disease have progressed to a point where its risk cut the line of mitral valve replacement before it was worth doing. But around the mid-90s, repair became a lot better. And so then in the mid-90s, the discussion was, when should you repair a mitral valve? And we realized we should repair it much earlier. So at that time, back in the mid-90s, we were of the opinion that if you saw the left ventricle end systolic dimension getting big, or approaching 3.94, you would repair the mitral valve. Because now you could do mitral valve repair at a lower risk than mitral valve replacement. And so the cutoff line has now come down. So the disease progression line goes up like this. Previously, replacement is up here, class 4 heart failure with severe MR. Now, the repair is down here. So this group, which is progressive LV dysfunction, maybe class 2 or 3 symptoms, already needs to be repaired. Of course, fast forward to now, or back then 10 years ago when I met with S.J. Park, we will repair if you have a severe MR that's suitable for repair. And now, 10 years later, the suitability of repair has enlarged tremendously. If you have good surgeons, you can repair almost anything. And so now, just having severe MR, you will repair it. Now, John Chambers' point was a very clever point. He says, what if with one finger I touch your forehead and whatever MR you have, I can treat you with that risk, the risk of touching your forehead with your finger, and you have a perfectly functional mitral valve that's as good as new. When would you do mitral valve surgery then? So at that point, I actually took my finger. I said, what if I could treat your mitral valve and make it complete new with this wrist? And I poked SJ's forehead, to the horror to everybody who sat around and the Korean drug stand reps that were around. They were all a bit shocked. I said, you would do it if you have trivial MR. You would do it if you have almost no MR. As long as you have a bit of MR, you would do it because there's no risk to it and the surgery has no bad outcome. So when you do something, it's not dependent on the disease. It's really a cutoff between the disease and your treatment. If you don't do the treatment, let's say in the 1980s, we stopped investing in mitral valve surgery. We just replaced with mechanical valves, and that's all we did. We'll never move on. We never dream of repairing a mitral valve. We never dream of putting in a valve prosthetic mitral valve. We never dream of putting a valve in valve for valve prosthetic valve failure. We never thought of these things. We never thought of lampoon. We never thought of septal reduction for all of these things that we're doing now. If we never did all of that, we will still be stuck with only treating patients in class 4 heart failure with severe MR. Is that what you want? I was taken aside after that and told that that's not the way to speak to Professor Park. But Professor Park was very generous. He actually invited me back to TCAP the next year. So he was very kind to me. But the point is, if we stop doing something, we only get worse at it. And that cutoff point is never going to get low enough to treat the disease. Now, the other great example we have historically is AF. Back in the 90s, when Hesagari in Bordeaux started doing AF, he did AF with quite unbelievable results. I use the word unbelievable because I was back then in the meetings and I didn't believe those results. But he never even imagined that doing AF could reduce mortality, all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, cardiovascular bad outcome, MACE, or combined endpoints. Never investigated this. His only endpoint was symptom improvement because he knew AF was a disease that didn't kill you. AF was quite a benign disease, so you can only improve the symptoms. The problem with CTO is that we somehow got fixed in our head that coronary artery disease is a dangerous disease. And it is. The acute version of it is, at least. Non-STEMI, STEMI, ACS, that's a dangerous disease. But stable coronary disease is actually a very stable disease, as the name suggests. And so we should think about it like we think about AF. Now, if we had took Hesagari's work and expanded it into a large randomized controlled trial back in the 90s, I could bet my bottom dollar that he would not have been able to prove any significant outcome benefit based on the standard of AF ablation back then. But look at AF. They kept doing AF. They did more and more AF. AF occupies half my cath lab now. Not that I'm complaining. But AF has just rapidly grown without ever asking the question, is it saving lives? Symptomatic, do it. Symptomatic, do it. And now what do we see? We start seeing that AF is useful. It does reduce combined endpoints in heart failure patients. And we begin to find, oh, it's useful. It can reduce mortality in heart failure patients. It can reduce mortality in this subgroup, that subgroup. And even now, there are hints in the data that AF can reduce mortality overall. And I'm sure soon enough we will see this amazing trial that will demonstrate that AF can reduce mortality. Why? Because AF has improved. And AF isn't a disease completely without mortality, just like stable coronary artery disease. But they've worked 25 years at it to improve it, to do lots of procedures, to get to a point where the equipment improves and you can do the procedure quickly without complications, so that now the procedure risk is so low that it's beginning to cut on the outcome curve of the disease of atrial fibrillation. AF should be the model we should go after. We should try to do more CTO and improve our CTO skills so that we get a CTO intervention to the level where it starts benefiting the patient more than just symptoms. Of course, before we have the data, we still have to be scientists. So before we have the data, we should still stick to doing it for symptomatic patients. But if we stop doing CTO altogether because we say it has no mortality benefit, then we'll never get there. And I'm sure, I think every cardiologist, even Professor Park, would agree that there is the odd, rare symptomatic patients with CTOs that really you change their lives by opening up a CTO. They become a different person, and it's well worthwhile to do that. So that's my 2 cents of my philosophy on whether we should do CTO. I guess from the name of the channel, CTO Demon Channel, the answer is yes. What do you think? Leave me a comment. Try to respond to you. If you like, please press the like button. And I hope you subscribe to see the other contents. I'm running out of academic content to talk about now, so there'll be more fun stuff like this. See you next time.